So first of all, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us, attendees, and especially our incredible panelists. I have a few housekeeping items to clarify before we get started. This session is being recorded. It will be sent to attendees and available on both a YouTube channel and the GSN Planet website. It will also be sent to all registrants. So a lot of people register and then don't actually attend to get a copy of it. So that will happen. And thank you to our sponsors for helping make these educational sessions possible. One Well World, Cosmetic, Universal Companies, Living Earth Crafts, Sinclair, Eminence Organics, Force of Nature, and all of our other sponsors. Please note the GSN is a nonprofit organization. Your membership and support help us continue the work we do, and we very much appreciate it. I also wanted to give a shout out to Dara Mayhew, our executive director of GSN, without whom these sessions would not be possible, because I can come up with ideas, as can some of our other panelists, but it's Dara that actually tells us where to be and when and how to get in, and we very much appreciate Dara.
Thank you.
Now, kicking off the main event, I'm thrilled to introduce our speakers for this panel. We've gathered an incredible group that brings a great experience and perspective to this situation, to this issue, to this problem of beauty waste. So I'm going to share a few things of why we got started, and then I'm going to turn it over to each of our panelists. But I think everyone that's dialed in is familiar with the beauty waste problem. And we are all trying to do everything we can to fix it. So I've gathered several other panelists from different areas, from different companies and with different missions. And I'm really excited to turn it over to them to share their perspectives, what they're doing, how they're doing it, and how we're really going to change the world better. I'll start. Nora, why don't you start?
Okay, excellent. Hello, everybody. My name is Nora, and I'm a co-founder of a company called HiBar. This is like one of my favorite topics because this is actually HiBar's reason for being. We are a mission-based company, and we're inspiring the removal of single-use plastic, and we're doing that by reformulating beauty and personal care products to be beautiful, to be high-performing, and to be plastic-free. So packaging decisions took us probably over a year to come up with, and we have a unique form for our product as well. And so that was also part of our consideration. I know we'll get more into this, but it's a great group of panelists, and I'm really excited to be here. So thank you.
Jessie, do you want to go next?
I'm Jessie Crescent. I'm the director of marketing for O'Burke Company. We are a 114-year-old packaging distributor that's located in the US, and we have branches coast to coast. We are really digging into sustainability as a whole conversation, trying to have more honest conversations about it. We, of course, sell plastic, aluminum, glass, everything. We stock and make custom with a global sourcing network. Our supply chain's really invested in the beauty and wellness space, and we've seen a lot of trends come and go. So one of the things that we're really looking at currently is lightweighting and how that can impact the recycling stream and end of life of product. Aluminum, glass, always here to stay, and infinitely recyclable, but do sometimes carry a larger carbon footprint. So we're looking to kind of balance those conversations. And then there's some really exciting new trends that we're seeing as well. One of them is fill materials. So we're looking at mineral fills, things like agave, where plastic ends up being more of a binding agent for the fill product, and then that gets to biodegrade. So it's a really exciting time. And I think our goal is to just guide our brands to make the right decisions for them, for their municipalities, for their geolocation, and for the end of life cycle of their product.
I can go next, of course. So first of all, thank you so much for having me here, Nicole. It's so exciting to be a part of this panel alongside you, Jessie, and Nora, a dream team in my opinion. Hi, everyone. I'm Anjali, and I'm the Senior Business Partnerships Manager at Repurpose Global, the world's leading plastic action and verified plastic recovery platform. And to put what we do super simply, we enable circularity for brands that work with us in two ways. So first is analysis, where we help them understand their environmental footprint of their products, because we firmly believe that you cannot reduce what you do not know. And then two, we help you take action on plastic waste. So we have plastic recovery projects that are situated in global plastic pollution hotspots across the globe. And we work with brands to really work with communities on the ground that are being affected by the plastic waste problem, because this is not just an environmental issue, it's an environmental and socioeconomic issue. So when you're trying to look at solutions, they need to take a look at both those sides of the coin and not just look at it as separate issues. So we really help brands understand the problem on the ground, create tangible impact and action in areas that really need it, and then communicate the same very simply to their consumers, to their investors, to their retailers, to every single stakeholder that they want to bring this to life for. And we're currently working with over 350 brands on this, and we actually hit a really exciting milestone this week of recovering 65 million pounds of plastic waste. So this is definitely a fantastic time for me for this webinar.
Wow, 65 million. That's incredible. Thank you everyone for being here. I forgot I didn't introduce myself. And since I hope it's not just my closest friends on the webinar, I will do that. My name is Nicole Lamsa. I'm the COO of Hanua Hawaiian Skincare. We're a Hawaiian-founded skincare brand founded on the principles of Hawaiian healing, but also minimal environmental impact. From day one, our founder used glass bottles because growing up in Hawaii, she saw plastic floating in the ocean constantly. So from a brand ethos, we can't use something like plastic. We use glass, which we feel like is better for the planet, better for our bodies, better for our products. But as mentioned, we know that glass does have impact as well. So how this panel got started is we are all here because we have some interest, either vested or sheer curiosity, in fixing the beauty waste problem. As a brand owner, as similar to Nora, I spend a significant amount of my time trying to find the most low impact packaging. And even sometimes I'm stumped when beauty products, with some of our own products, are tubes, plastic, aluminum lined. Are they recyclable? Why or why not? And I'm discovering, the answer is, unfortunately, the answer is it depends. It depends on geography. It depends on a lot of factors. Beauty packaging is also quite small, which often makes it hard to sort properly, so it often isn't recycled. But we want to make this better, and so exactly how do we do it? And that's why we brought together this incredible panel to talk a little bit about the problem, but more about solutions and what we're seeing. So I'm going to just share a couple stats that are a little bit sobering, and then we'll move on to some highlights. So according to some reports, 120 billion units of packaging are trashed each year, and most of that isn't recycled due to material type or size. Mainly, as I said earlier, beauty packaging is often quite small. It's either missed in the recycling line or it's just too small to be worthwhile. Sometimes the products are still in the packaging and the recycler just doesn't want to deal with it. So a lot of it ends up in landfill, and that's something that we're trying to change. So we have a number of questions to go through, and then we will have time for Q&A at the end. So please save some of your questions to put in the chat. So I'd like to start off by talking about recycling and carbon footprint on a relative basis by packaging type. So as Nora mentioned, and as I spoke about as well, there's a lot of decisions that go into packaging. Like I use glass bottles, but glass isn't always, I'm holding it, but you can't really see it. Glass isn't always best because of carbon footprint. So we have to kind of think about these different things. And there's really a lot of confusion about, sorry, I'm skipping ahead. So yes, so on a relative basis by packaging type, there's a lot of confusion and misinformation about what can be recycled and how easy it is. So I'd like to talk to our panelists about how do we analyze different materials that are recycled, and then how do we also incorporate carbon footprint? Maybe Anjali, do you want to start with that one?
Yeah, of course. I think the short answer is unfortunately, recycling is not standardized, and we really wish it was. Recycling and its many limitations are something that we're all up against, especially in the beauty and personal care industry. It's frustrating, but we do have to remember that recycling is a business. Materials have to be collected, they have to be sorted, they have to be processed in order for them to actually end up being recycled. So before we talk about that, let's really level set on the limitations that recycling has today. So first of all, Nicole, to your point, size really matters. Any packaging that is smaller than 2 by 2 inches often doesn't get sorted because it ends up falling through the grates falling to the grates when it's being collected and sorted. This includes most cosmetics and a significant amount of personal care packaging. Next, material, which again, Nicole, you touched upon, where there are so many different materials that every single product that is coming up to a recycling facility is using, from glass to aluminum to paper to cardboard to plastic. And even within those, there are so many different subtypes that are there. So when you're looking at your product, you're of course looking at materials overall, but you should also be looking at materials at a sub-level, because some subtypes might be recyclable while others might be not. It's unfortunately, like I said, again, not really standardized. So it's something that everyone has to do every step of the way very consciously. And then next, it's format. The format of your packaging matters a lot. Flexible packaging, for example, is often not recycled because it's made of multiple layers of different materials that are fused together. So let's talk about the average pump that the beauty product uses. The pump, for example, contains plastic. It contains metal springs. Sometimes it even contains a glass ball, which makes it so difficult to separate. And this is also why monomaterial packaging is always preferred for better end-of-life potential. And then I'm sure everyone has this on their minds, but what about compostable plastics? What about bio-based plastics? And these come, although they're a great solution, these come with their own set of infrastructure problems because they cannot be recycled in your regular recycling facility. They need to have special infrastructure that is actually enabling them to be recycled. Otherwise, they're treated like just any other type of plastic that is being used. And these are just some of the end-of-life considerations that we need to keep in mind when we're designing products for recyclability. And it's challenging because what lipstick is going to be bigger than 2 by 2 inches? And until the recycling infrastructure catches up, we really do need to think holistically about the products that we're bringing to market and how we are designing them for end of life, so that your average consumer also understands that this is how I need to dispose this product off properly. And each material has a different end of life potential, and every single one of them comes with different embedded carbon emissions. So of course, we're looking at emissions that are being generated when you are producing that material, but we're also looking at it when you're transporting that material, when it's being shipped from your warehouse to your consumers. And all of these considerations together holistically need to be looked at in order for you to be able to make a really informed decision about how you want your packaging to look like. And the best suggestion from my side would always be to conduct a life cycle assessment. Unless you conduct a life cycle assessment, it would be really difficult for you as a brand to know what are my plastic pollution hotspots, what are my carbon hotspots, what are my waste hotspots, and then figuring out. I think I'm always very pleasantly surprised by how companies are always able to figure out small wins when they actually have the data in front of them. But it's the lack of data that makes it so difficult as a process for us to figure out how do we make this better. So I think conducting a life cycle assessment and then using that as a base to inform your future decisions is always the best step forward when you're looking at understanding recyclability and waste and carbon for your packaging and product.
That is super helpful. Jesse, do you have comments on what your clients think about in terms of this question as well? Because you have clients that span the gamut in sustainability is number one focus. Sustainability is not even in the vocabulary.
Absolutely. I think, from our side, we see that a lot of it comes down to price point, and of course, a consumer demand. So we see that, there is consumer demand increasing for companies to be more transparent about their packaging and what's going into it. So in order to meet that need, there's a few different things that we see happening a lot. One of them is people are using a lot less plastic and generally trying to decrease plastic across the board. So whether that means using a different material, maybe an aluminum, maybe a glass, something that's going to be infinitely recyclable, that's one option. The other option is to potentially lightweight. But that doesn't necessarily work all the time for a luxury package or something similar to that, where you're really trying to hit that value proposition at the same time. So you're kind of bouncing back and forth between these consumer needs and trying to present your brand in a unique way with shelf impression, scroll impression. And then when you add the decoration piece to it, it also affects recycling and how things can be scanned. So, it really is about finding the balance that's going to work for your specific goals and making those choices. Unfortunately, there isn't really, I think doing an assessment, as Anjali had mentioned, is really important because there isn't one solution that's going to work for everybody across the board. And we really see that, using less plastic probably is the one that has the most impact on end of life overall in terms of reducing the amount of plastic that ends up in landfills. And then using the right types of plastics that are going to be more recyclable, like PET is more recyclable than many other plastics. But it is about putting together that entire solution. I think also simplifying, and I know monomaterial was mentioned as well. There can be some caveats to that. A lot of times things that we consider monomaterial in terms of tubes and especially pumps and sprayers do have a slightly different plastic that's inside representing what was the metal spring or the ball or the gasket. A lot of times we have, a PP pump that has a PE gasket inside, so that contaminates the recycling stream. And sometimes these things are promoted as recyclable solutions when the reality of the end of life is not so simple. So I think it's really important to look at geographically where you're going to be distributing your product and understand what the recycling capabilities are in that particular area. And if it's nationwide, recycling capabilities really differ, depending on state, depending on individual county, even town. So you can't make an overall decision, unfortunately, that's going to, resolve those issues. And I think, Nicole, you put it really well the other day, that everything that we do is additive. So every time we're coming up with product, developing product, it adds to that waste stream, recycling stream, end of life cycle. So how can we reduce the impact as much as possible? And there's a very large menu available.
On that point, and I think Nora and I are on the same page here. If you look at like Highbar and Hanua, we're not brands that put out 10 new products a year, because a lot of new products are unfortunately marketing driven rather than like function driven. So I think we're both of our brands are very intentional about putting out a product, and there are a lot of brands out there, especially that are more sustainable, that are more intentional, and really only put out new products that are additive, that are different than something that's in the market, because we don't need to put something out that already exists. Or frankly, I already have a great cleanser or toner. I don't need to have 7 facial toners, because that's just not necessary. So that's hard. It's honestly hard from a brand perspective, because consumers and retailers always want what's new. And we're constantly educating people, saying new isn't always better. So let's look at what's tried and true and what we know works and has been working for years. So it's a balance.
Absolutely. I have another comment just about, as a company that has created a package with the life cycle of the package in mind, it's a little bit of the opposite approach, but there are the challenges still of educating the consumer on a different format. And when you have, like, our packaging is paper recyclable packaging, but there isn't really an infrastructure for even recycling paper. And now so many companies are converting to this new, product, this new packaging format, and we don't have the infrastructure in place to actually recycle all the packaging. So that's something to consider. And another thing for people who are considering packaging design right now, there are extended producer laws coming into effect in the next few years, where you actually submit your product packaging for review, and you will be charged the cost of the recycling or end of life cycle for that product. So as people are determining what format they want to put their new product in as far as a package, that's definitely something to consider, because there will be costs associated with whatever the package is in a few years. It's just being developed now, so it's still going to be until 2027, I believe, before these take effect. But there are 5 states that have passed this law, and it goes by state, and there are 10 states that are reviewing the legislation around this. So additional things to keep in mind.
Yeah, I think that will help. I'm hoping that will help make lightweighting, as Jesse referred to it, more of a positive thing, rather than, a lot of luxury brands, when you buy a product, if you buy a 1-ounce serum, you think the package should weigh a pound, because it needs to be more substantial. And if it only weighs an ounce, there's nothing in it. So I'm hopeful that these laws will drive some change there, because it can't just be the small brands or the small and medium brands like us doing this, because it's hard, and we need the big brands to also kind of get on board.
I was going to mention another thing just about secondary packaging. So that's also something to consider. So we're an eco brand, so we use 0 plastic in any of our shipping or any of our materials. And when we designed our packaging, we actually designed them to fit in a box with no need for fill. So if you plan to be a company that's you're shipping out, an e-commerce company, considering your shipping materials and how the package will fit in the box is also an excellent way to reduce waste. So those are additional considerations, and there's so many complications, like you talked about. Like if you have a product that has multiple materials in it, the consumer has no idea how to handle that, and it's almost like the consumer is looking to retailers and producers to help them do this and to help them be more sustainable. And so we really have to educate them, even on the package. We say on our package, this is recyclable. It actually is compostable, but because of the compostable laws that are changing, we can't put compostable on here. And so those are considerations as well. Like we put on our pack what to do with the pack when you're done with it. And if you have multiple materials, it's going to be a longer explanation for sure.
Absolutely. And I think that your consumer is conscious of that, because they're already purchasing your brand. So they get excited about the possibility of being able to help with that process. And I think to your point, Nicole, about more boutique brands really driving this conversation, I think that everybody is paying attention to what smaller mid-tier brands are doing in terms of their packaging and the aesthetic. Because I think that a lot are able to combine really beautiful aesthetics with simplified packaging, simplified silhouettes. And so that's making everybody think that's essentially cooler. It's more exciting to go in that direction. It looks fresh. So I think there are a lot of ways to elevate the look while maintaining that essentially that goal.
Yeah, that's. So on that note, moving to sustainable packaging and examples, this is on every brand's mind, even if a small percentage are acting on it. I'd like to talk about some of the bigger shifts that brands are making. So I know, Nora, you've talked a bit about what Highbar has done, but anything you can talk about regarding changes that you're thinking about making. You may have already said your punchline, because everything you shared is totally relevant right here.
You know, for us, we spend a lot of time also figuring out in-house in our production process how we can reduce plastic waste. So for us, you know, that's part of our consideration. And like I said, we think about our shipping. We have water activated tape. So we altered our box sealer so that it would be water tape instead of plastic tape. And we altered our pallet wrapper, so it's all biodegradable. So we make those kind of shifts. But when, you know, at our point, so we're also anhydrous, which means we make products without water. And so they're concentrated, they last longer, they're lighter to ship. And as we're considering adding more products to our line, like we're mostly considering bars, but if we wanted to add like a balm or something, we've actually considered like a material that's made of mushrooms or a sugar cane. You know, there are plant-based materials coming out now too that could be rigid, but they still decompose. So that's also something we're considering, although our name is High Bar. So I have a hard time imagining we'd go to a pack, but we'll see.
Well, another side benefit to the anhydrous products is that you don't need as many preservatives. So that's another like win for sustainability. But anyway, on to both Jesse and Anjali, I would love to hear from your perspective, because you guys see many brands. Like what are other brands doing, and how are they making these decisions?
Yeah, I think if there's one thing that I can say for sure, it's that sustainability has moved a lot further in the last 3 years than it has in the last 3 decades. And I think we can all see that shift very clearly now. So for example, even something as small as a sustainability page is now a staple for most websites rather than something that's out of the norm. So I do think that, to your point about talking more about the work that you're doing, about your wins, but also about your failures, I think is something that's becoming more and more apparent now, where earlier, if something was not working out, it would quietly be recalled rather than something that brands are very actively talking about, that we tried this initiative, we maybe tried to move up the packaging away from plastic to another material, and we went into these problems where maybe its shelf life reduced, or maybe it couldn't stand certain temperatures. And because of people sharing that, now other brands are already aware about that and are taking it into consideration when they're designing their own products. So I feel one of the biggest shifts that I've seen in the last couple of years is that brands are feeling a lot more comfortable talking about what has worked, but even more so about what hasn't. So just as an example, Grove Collaborative actually recently launched an interview which they did with Fast Company, where they were talking about how they had a very ambitious goal of reaching 100% plastic free for all of their own brand products by 2025. And they're recalling that goal a year and a half in advance, because they can see even today that it's not something that can be achieved because of material considerations that they have to make. So although they're 95% plastic free, that 100%, 95 to 100% is what the problem is. And when a company as big as Grove is becoming open about the struggles that it's facing, it's just inviting people into the conversation, which makes it a much more collaborative and open space. I think sustainability should not really be looked at as a competitive advantage, but more as a collaboration opportunity, because all of us are in the same place. We're all in the same game here. And at the same time, I think one other big shift that I've seen is that entire communities are being formed to really combat this crisis. So for example, Thrive Market has this Thrive Plastic Action Working Group, in which they're bringing all of the brands that are selling in their platform and inviting them to join their Plastic Action Working Group, so that they can collectively work towards recovery goals, towards reduction goals. And that kind of knowledge sharing is invaluable, in my opinion. Like nothing will move the industry forward than something, Nora, even to your point, just showing the products and how they fit together in packaging is such a good visualization of how other companies can look at it. So I think designing thoughtfully, where even pre-launch brands today are coming up and figuring out, spending time on packaging and how to make sure that they are not adding to the problem, but helping solve, all of these developments are extremely heartening. And I think that it's really something that is moving the industry forward, because it's such an easy space for you to have conversations in. And I think if a lot of times when I've talked to brands, one of the problems that they face is that we're not sure what the correct decision is. There are so many different options in place. And it's all I can say to that is that you're not alone. You're not the only company that is facing these things. And what you really need is a community. So for example, we recently launched this this community called the Purpose Network, which is basically bringing together different people across the CPG and FMCG industry to just empower them to learn more about sustainability. Like, what can you do maybe in your personal life, maybe in your company? How can you encourage participation in these things? Because as soon as you start a conversation, it's easy to move forward, but it's starting a conversation and getting validation that's always difficult as a new person in the industry.
Absolutely. I would echo that, Anjali. We're seeing, I think, in the past about 15 years, it used to be that we would see something that was a new option for sustainability, and we would need to go out and push that product to our potential customers. And it would typically be at a higher price point, and there wouldn't be a lot of research on it. And then we wouldn't know much about the end of life cycle. There would be claims associated with that. But I think as we've moved away from greenwashing and opened up the conversation more, we get a lot more requests inbound of customers looking at sustainability efforts, asking questions, being more knowledgeable overall from the brand perspective, understanding that and coming to us and asking very specific things and having specific goals in mind. So I think a really great example of that is Captain Blankenship, which is a brand that we use that focuses in hair care, and they're almost entirely in aluminum. And aluminum's fantastic because it is an infinitely recyclable material, as we discussed before. And I think they've really made this great investment in that material. So that's the material that ends up in the end of life cycle for that brand. And it may be that for right now, recycling that material may carry a carbon footprint, or producing it may carry a carbon footprint, but there's a lot of strides moving ahead, in the next 5 years, in the next 10 years, that are going to streamline that process. And we see a lot of innovation in that area, trying to reduce the carbon footprint and actually strengthen the recycled material that comes out of mined aluminum from landfill, from recycling streams. So I think that that's a really conscious decision that they've made for the brand, and they were able to start out that way and continue. And I think those kinds of brands entering into the market and filling that need are really pushing the shift for some larger brands that are established in certain packaging to look at those as serious, because they now have data. They can now take a look. They can now, look at different options and see how it's actually playing out in certain markets. And they're seeing the consumer demand rise because of that. In addition, we have invested particularly in EcoVadis scoring over the past 4 years. And we're seeing that become more widespread from the manufacturing and distribution side. So a lot of our vendors are EcoVadis scored as well. And it's something to look for when you're looking for a packaging purveyor. And I think you had talked before, Anjali, about the crossover between ethics and sustainability and community. And I think EcoVadis does a good job of putting all of that together and giving a scorecard across the board. So I think that's something that everybody's considering, is where are we sourcing these things from globally, and how is that impacting those markets as well. So generally a shift towards more conscious decisions across the board in all tiers of the market. And we're also, I think beauty has been very conscious of this for some time, but we're also seeing it in food and beverage. We're seeing it in nutraceutical, pharma, really across the board.
Yeah, I think, one thing you said, Anjali, is that customers sometimes get, or you implied that they get like overwhelmed. There's so many different there's so many different things to think about. And then as a brand owner, I deal with that every day. However, I do have to remind like myself and all of us that, thousands of small movements like create big shifts and big waves. So I think if a brand is able to go from 100% plastic to maybe using some recyclable or compostable piece, even if it's only a 20% improvement, that's something. So I think we need to, I don't want it to be all dire and, it's so hard, we can't figure it out. because we are figuring it out. It's going to take time to balance the carbon footprint and the end of life options for products, but we are figuring it out, and that's what I think is exciting.
And I think incremental wins are always fantastic. Like when you can,
Yes.
even that 20% increase is actually not small at all. It's a huge win, in my opinion. So anytime we're able to make even these smaller shifts towards more sustainable packaging, towards better end of life, I think it's a win.
It is, and small wins. So one project that we do at Hanua, so I mentioned we use all glass packaging, and glasses, as we talked about earlier in the panel, glasses is easily recyclable, but it isn't always recyclable. And we were getting customer, not complaints, but questions like, oh, my area doesn't recycle. Like, can I send the glass bottles back to you? And so we struggled with that from a brand perspective, because it, like, for sanitary reasons, my bottles are really little. I can't effectively clean these and resell these. Like, that isn't the right thing to do. However, what we found this glass recycler in New Orleans, in Louisiana. They discover that their jurisdiction doesn't recycle. So they started collecting glass bottles, mostly larger bottles than cosmetics, but they break the glass up. And now they're actually a full-fledged independent recycler, that they recycle all types of glass, all colors, and they repurpose it into building materials, art materials. They're even doing coastal restoration and sandbags, like with the finely graded glass. So several years ago, we reached out to them and said, hey, can we send you glass that our customers can't recycle? Because they also don't care if it's lined with product. They crush it up anyway, and then that gets kind of rinsed away or burned away. So we have a partnership with them, so customers can send product directly or send empty bottles directly to them, and then we give product credit. So for a certain amount of bottles, like, you can end up getting free product if you send them back. Now, I know this causes other impacts. So we end up buying carbon offsets to cover, like, the shipping impact. So it isn't perfect, but it's like one of these small incremental wins, as you put it. And I think we have to pursue some of those, at least in the near term, while we figure out the perfect solution. So on that, I would love to talk more about something that you touched on earlier, Anjali, on incentivizing recycling, and by building this economy, by making this more of a circular, kind of a circular stream. Can you share more about what you are doing?
Yeah, for sure. And I think this is actually one of those things that makes me super hopeful about the work that we're doing. It's because it's like I said before, when you're looking at recycling, when you're looking at end of life, you're not just looking at an environmental issue around waste, but you're also looking at the communities that are bearing the brunt of our consumption. So you want to make sure that every single solution that you're looking at takes both into account, and it's not just looking at it as an environmental issue that is very separate from the communities that are being impacted by it. So just to give you an example, one of the impact projects that we have is in Kerala. It's a coastal state in India, and there we're working across public partnerships, private partnerships, and working with women's self-help groups to really incentivize the collection of low-value plastic waste, which is your toffee wrappers, your chips packets, basically lightweight materials that cannot be recycled. And because they cannot be recycled, they do not have any value in the market. So what we're doing there is we're incentivizing the recovery of this plastic, because we know that's exactly what's ending up polluting our environment, because it has no collection. And we've had this project for 5 years now, almost. And in our latest report, we actually saw that the collection and processing of that low-value plastic actually doubled in that state, in the villages that we were working at. And this was something that it is actually a really big win, because a lot of it is coming purely from consumer education. It's because households are now educated that they need to sort these wastes before they give them for processing. They have regular teams that are coming in to collect that waste from their house. So they are also seeing the difference that it's making to their community, their immediate localities. So I think at the end of the day, in order for us to be able to incentivize recycling, consumers and households in regions would always have to put pressure on the local government, on different waste management facilities in their region to get them to provide the services that they need to manage end of life. Very reasonably speaking, we cannot expect every consumer to sort their waste into 10 different categories and then to give them to different material facilities to make sure that they reach their end destination. Consumers do want it to be easy for them to make the right choices. And as people who are working in the sustainability industry, who are designing these products, I think we need to take that into consideration as well, that when we are asking them to recycle it, is it possible for them to do that? How many more steps will they have to take to make that actually happen? So I think the easiest way to see a difference is by bringing your community into that matter, by raising awareness around these things. We might think that beach cleanups don't pick up that much plastic. You clean it up today and there's more plastic on it again tomorrow with the waves. But it's not just about the amount of plastic that you're collecting. It's about the amount of awareness that you're building, the community that you're developing around that issue that will really help move the needle forward. And it's the exact same when you want to incentivize recycling in your communities, in your cities, in your localities, because that's the best way to do it.
Such a good point. I took my parents on a beach cleanup. This is a side note, but it's very relevant. A few years ago, and afterwards, my dad said, "I will never use a straw again." I had no idea, and I wouldn't have even thought about that. Me telling him stop using straws does nothing, but him seeing it and experiencing the number of straws or the number of like plastic toothbrushes was very impactful. So I think it's very relevant. We are coming to we have about 15 minutes left, and I did want to save time. I know we had some questions sent in ahead of time, and I see that we have a question here as well. So I think that I might transition over to the Q&A. So I will probably turn it over to Dara, who has collected all of our questions.
Sure.
Dara, do you want to share those?
I will. My first one is a two-part question. Are refillable packaging options truly cost-effective, or are they primarily a marketing strategy? Additionally, what is your opinion on reusable containers and returnable packaging, and is this concept gaining popularity among consumers?
That's a really good question. Jesse, do you want to take that? It might be good for you to start with that one.
Sure. So first of all, I think anytime you can use less packaging overall, it is going to make a positive impact, especially as we were talking about incremental. I think a lot of the refillables that are out there now, there's a practice of putting the bottle out maybe in an aluminum. So it is going to be infinitely recyclable at end of life. And then you're adding a pump, but you're only purchasing the pump one time. And I do think that that helps, as most pumps end up in waste. But I think, putting an older pump into a newer package with new fill has some contamination concerns, other things like that. So I do think it helps overall. I don't think that we've gotten to the perfect solution yet. We do also have some customers that purchase wholesale glass from us locally in New Jersey that have bottle refill shops. And I think that's a really great option, especially if you're a brand that's trying to develop community locally and you do have a storefront, or you have the opportunity to do a pop-up or something like that, and you are able to recycle a larger glass package that's a little bit easier to be cleaned, or you're asking your customer to clean it and bring it back and refill it directly, I think that can help quite a bit. And then, it is sanitary and they're more in charge of that. So I like the pathway. And I know, Anjali, you were mentioning before, if you can encourage people to recycle on the local level and to really take charge of that, they just want a path forward to know that it's real, to know that they can make an impact and reduce. And I think directly interfacing with your customers in that way can be incredibly helpful, because you take it out of the recycling stream and you empower them.
Yeah, and I think just to add to that, I do agree that refill can be a really viable option going forward, but we're definitely not there yet right now. And it's also because we currently don't have any one-size-fits-all type of approach, because this is something that has to be done at an industry level as well, where if let's say you're buying a shampoo from X brand and you're buying a conditioner from Y brand and you're trying to buy refillable bottles, but those formats aren't compatible, then it's difficult for you to continuously refill your product, because it makes it difficult for you to switch to a different brand because you've invested that money. So it's a lot of these different considerations, and it also has to be thought about very thoughtfully for the SKUs that you're planning to do that for. If consumer repurchasing isn't strong for a specific SKU, then looking at refillable packaging is probably not the best path forward in that case. So it really depends, I think, on the SKUs that you're looking at, on the packaging that you have across the board, at least in your brand. And even if like, do you think that your average consumer will repurchase, will buy that refillable packaging? Is that too much effort for them? Will they directly go buy another product? So you want to make sure that when you're doing this, you're not maybe doubling the amount of product or packaging just because you're assuming refill, but you're actually looking at it very clearly, where this is what we expect the percentage of our consumers to actually participate in this, so that it might come as a good gesture from your side, but you also want to make sure that it's viable for your consumer to be able to do that regularly. So definitely not there yet, but I'm very hopeful that this is the solution that would shape up in the next couple of years.
I think I can say a little bit on the reusable packaging and really options that you can send back. And Jesse touched on this. I think the reusable option is great for like local places where you can go in and fill it yourself. I think packaging that is sent back to a brand is really difficult. As I mentioned earlier, it's really difficult to sanitize, and then as a brand, I'm uncomfortable taking responsibility that it's been cleaned well enough, and then I might not have the facilities to like clean this little bottle well enough and then refill it and send it out. So reusable is really only there. I think it's really only an option on a local level. I think it's hard otherwise, and it's hard for a brand to invest in not just producing incredible products, but then this like cleaning system and repackaging system. And then I want to make sure that like Nora sent this bottle in, I want to refill it and send it back to Nora, not to Jesse. And that those systems just aren't really there except on maybe a local level with a like do it yourself type of place.
I have the thought too that it's not very beauty to be in a package like that. It feels more beauty to be in a bottle or a glass jar, but I can see where cleaning solutions, you know, maybe refillable household cleaners and stuff, that would be a great route to go. But there is the consumer perception. I mean, even we run into that as a solid product, like, is this going to work in my hair? So, you know, there is consumer perception that you also have to consider.
I think in terms of sealing the product properly and keeping it clean, we do see a lot of brands doing like some sort of really beautiful showpiece of packaging that then gets like a pod dropped in or something like that. But typically that pod is plastic. So it does add to that conversation. But I do think you're again reducing, but are you overproducing? To Anjali's point before, are you overproducing the initial package so that you can then you know, have that piece of the customer refilling it? And are they actually going to refill it?
Excellent points. Sarah, maybe on to the next question. I think we hit that one.
Sure. Our next question is, what can consumers do to really help push more sustainable packaging?
Buy brands that are doing sustainable things. That's my quick answer.
Yeah.
Demand
I think
demand
also,
from your favorite
sorry, go
brands as well.
Yeah.
Oh no, I was just saying that support the brands that are doing this, and then demand changes from the brands that you do want to see that shift in. I think a lot of times consumers don't realize the power that they have and how much brands would do to make sure that they have that loyal consumer base that they currently do. So making demands for what you think is the right thing, or at least demanding answers for why something is not happening, is crucial.
Absolutely.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Okay. And another question, I think we have time. How can brands looking to make a change start the process of searching for sustainable packaging options?
I think Anjali, this might be perfect for you and you, Jesse. We have exactly the perfect audience.
Jesse, feel free to start. I can jump in after.
Oh, sure. So I think talking to an expert is important, because I think the power of working with a distributor or a consultant or anybody who's been in the industry for a while and worked with different manufacturing networks is going to have a deeper knowledge of what is going to work for you and what will work for your formula. I think also talking to your formulator and understanding, what they can fill, what's going to work for them on the assembly line is really important. So first of all, you want your product to be effective. You don't want it to leak. You want it to look nice. You want somebody to want to purchase it. And I think it's important to have that vision first and then try to see how you can make it sustainable. So one of the things that we've been experimenting with, especially with custom packaging, is looking at a product from the aesthetic perspective and seeing how we can match our brand's need for what impression they want to make, and then give a menu of options for which materials they could use and what impact they may make. So I think we're talking about working a little bit more with Repurpose Global and trying to figure out how we can quantify that, because we know, from some perspectives that this is what aluminum is going to do for you. This is what lightweighting the plastic is going to do for you. This is what doing, a pour out solution versus a pump. They all have different effects on the formulation. The formulation in the end is what you're selling to your customer. So that really needs to be top of mind in this entire conversation. The packaging needs to support that. So that would be my best advice.
I have one thing to mention too. You just consider your distribution, because obviously glass is breakable, and the resending is wasteful, and also the same with aluminum. Like sometimes, depending on where you're distributing it, it gets tossed around pretty bad. Or if it goes out in singles from a distribution warehouse into just a bin, they just throw everything in a bin in singles and bring it into the store. And so a lot can happen to your package in that process.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and just to add to that, so Repurpose, beginning of this year, acquired this platform called Bluebird Climate, which really helps brands kind of make these data-backed decisions. Because let's say you as a brand are trying to figure out, I want to repack this product in a better manner that maybe has a lower environmental impact, but you're looking at 3 different quotes from suppliers and you're unsure, is this one the best? Is this one the best? Because none of them are following the same baseline. Every supplier has a different baseline that they're providing you with, using which their product is better against their competitors. So I think the tool really helps you. The new product development side of the tool really helps you see side-by-side comparisons of the environmental impact, including the carbon and waste impact of all of the different options that you've received. So really empowering you as a brand to make the decision that you feel is the right and that is backed by data. So when you are talking to your consumers about, let's say, you might have to switch from paper to a plastic packaging because of some shelf life issues, and you want to tell your consumers that the reason that we've made this decision is because of this, and the reason that we went ahead with plastic instead of maybe, let's say, paper is because we did this analysis and we found X and Y. So just bringing your consumers into that conversation. And at the same time, I think this is also where LCAs really come in the picture, because those help you realize your existing impact and then setting a baseline for your products before you make any other decisions to change things around. Because I think if there's one thing that everyone here knows, it's that doing repacks, doing product changes, even if it's a small design change, is not inexpensive. It takes time, it takes effort, and it takes money to be able to do that. So when you are making that decision, you want to feel completely sure that it's the right choice to go ahead.
It's not fun. Like designing new products and packaging can be fun, but repackaging is not. Nobody's happy to do it, except maybe your like printer. I think so, Dara. We have, I'll turn it over to you for the next questions, and I think we'll wrap up here in a few minutes.
Sure. This one has been submitted on our call today. What regulatory policies would help move the industry forward?
Those are coming.
Yeah.
It's actually a state by state basis that this is happening. But this legislation is actually, I'm even though it's going to cost brands money, I'm totally for it. It's really the only thing that's going to make an impact in business decisions to switch your materials to something, you know, that's going to be more affordable and better for the planet, because they're actually pulling garbage out of the ocean and looking at the brand of that garbage and then charging the brand for that product package being in, you know, an ocean. So, you know, that's something to consider, and that legislation is going to make a big impact on business decisions on what to choose. We don't know what the costs are going to be yet, but I do know that paper is going to be cheaper than plastic. So, you know, just consider those things, and that legislation's huge. There's also legislation, you know, California's leading the way in New York, eliminating hotel bottles and those types of things. And those legislations do great. And also the UN Plastics Treaty, and getting all of the information out there, and just about how plastic is set to increase production and the impact that that would have. Like, you know, it's so fossil fuel consumption to create any kind of plastic, and it's really detrimental to our environment. So the changes are coming, but yes, those will make big difference in legislation and in packaging.
I think just to add to that, one thing that would be helpful is for brands to be able to get clarity on what's coming their way, on if it's a state, like if let's say I'm a brand that's maybe producing my product in Oregon, but I'm selling across the US, does that mean I have to look at different regulations to comply with different distribution networks? So I think it's in terms of what's really going to help, the way that this would be the easiest is if there are national level regulations that are enforced across every state, because then it's one regulation across the board rather than something that's being incentivized in one state versus another, making this a conversation for everyone in the country rather than something that's only situated in one side, in one state.
Really good point.
Like what we're dealing with recycling right now too. It'll be similar for, I mean, at least in the near term, for better or for worse.
And one thing we recommend all of our brands do is design for the strictest regulation and try to meet that goal, and then you'll meet it across the country. So essentially treat it like it is a national regulation, and make your packaging suit that.
That makes sense. So 2027, that's when it's coming. That's a great question.
Do we have time for one more?
The next question is very relevant for brands. Acknowledge this forum is solution driven, but as the small business impact of these sustainable end of life items, collectively R&D, materials, COGS, etc., squeeze the bottom line. Understanding the solution on carbon footprint and environmental importance, are there subsidies and grants to support these and the stewardship fees, or is this a morale marketing driven cost? I mean, as far as I know, it's a morale. We don't, as a brand, we actually don't market a lot of what we do. We just do it because it's the right thing, and we want to keep like trash out of the landfill. But I think it is going to be brand by brand, and it is more of a morale, but it is a business decision. It's a smart business decision because good business practices make good businesses. But I'm not aware, to the point, I'm not aware of subsidies or grants to do this. Are any of the panelists?
we've had a grant from Minnesota to like set up our warehouse with compost, recycling, and there's grants for those types of things, but I haven't seen grants for switching packaging. But there is consumer demand, which drives sales. And so I do think that that's to, consider that too in your decision. And you can maybe cut costs with grants on other things, like I said, in the warehouse. We got a grant to like switch all our lights to, better lighting that's better for humans, and also get everything recycled bins, compost bins, and help us get organized in the warehouse.
This is a good idea. Maybe on our next panel, we'll have to have a regulator and we could talk about grants.
That's a great idea.
It's a really good idea.
Yeah.
I don't know if we have any other questions. I don't see any. So I will take this opportunity to thank our panelists immensely. I really appreciate your time today, your prep time, and just your companionship in this fight, because that is what this effort is. I also appreciate everyone that dialed in, and even those that registered that did not dial in, and you're going to be watching this later. Thank you for being part of this community, and thank you to GSN for helping us put this on.
Thank you.
And
Ellen,
with
Dora.
that, thank you. See everyone on the next panel.
See you.
Thanks so much.